Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and it is full review time on the Monterey Bay Knives Sea Otter. This is the first in-house made U.S. production Monterey Bay knife, which is really exciting. I got this knife at, that would have been Blade Show West, so I've had it for over a month now. I was really excited to get it from them at their table, and yeah, I've liked Monterey Bay knives for quite a while. Especially lately as I've gotten to know a little bit better Sanford and Ray Laconico over there. Both really cool dudes. I've become friends with Lindy and Richie, the knife modders who work over there, and I like the company, I like the people there, and I've liked a few of their knives. I haven't tried everything, but the ones I've tried have been good, and I love seeing them make the transition to in-house US made knives. I think that's a really cool thing that should be applauded and should be rewarded with people buying the knives. I would love for knives that I make in the future to have the option to move to US OEMs, and I think the more that the market supports that, it's a good thing. At the same time, I buy plenty of knives that are manufactured overseas. I don't want this to become a giant conversation on the topic, but suffice it to say, I like supporting US made products as much as I can. I think it's a great thing. It's not the end all be all, but when it happens, it should be applauded. And this is a case where it's happening. So I did a first impressions on this knife where I talked quite a bit about it and just how it was making me feel when I first got it. And a lot of those things are still true. This knife has surprised me a little bit because it's not exactly the things that I would put in, like if I were to describe a knife that would be perfect for me. This is missing the mark quite a bit in my ideal description of a perfect knife. It's thumb studs. I like holes better than studs. It's on washers. I generally prefer bearings. It's a titanium frame lock without an insert, without internal milling. The pocket clip isn't deep carry. It's not ideal for me. That said, I've just enjoyed it a lot. I've really, really liked carrying and using this knife. Somebody pointed out, I think it was in the comment section of my first video on this knife, that I was kind of being a little unfair because I can be mean to the Chris Reeve Sebenza quite a bit, fairly often. And this is, in a lot of ways, very, very similar to a small Sebenza. I've handled a few small Sebenzas, I've never owned one, but I can say with confidence, handling this knife, I like it better in hand. And I don't know, maybe it comes back to the branding of Chris Reeve knives. I don't love the way that they are talked about as being ultimate cutting edge, like the knives of the future, because they're the knives of the past now. That's its own thing. But maybe I'm also being a little bit unfair to that knife because I do like this knife so much. I don't know, but I have this knife in hand and I'm going to talk about how much I've enjoyed it. This one in particular, materials wise, is in CPM 154 blade steel. That's changing soon. These kind of first initial few drops of them, if you want to call it that, they've used CPM 154 because I think they've been figuring out how they're going to make these at scale in-house, and Ray Laconico is still hand grinding all of them at the moment. So CPM 154, I imagine, is easier to grind and less wear on your belts and all that kind of stuff. From what I've heard, I don't grind knives, but CPM 154 blade steel on this guy, again, changing soon. Handle material, all titanium, and this one has the fuller in the handle, which I like. That's a very signature Ray Laconico thing to do. I've seen plenty with plane scales, and then I've seen some with a blade swedge as well. This one doesn't have the swedge. I do kind of wish it did. I think the swedge looks great. We also have a titanium pocket clip, and what I'm assuming are titanium standoffs and thumb studs. So, a bunch of titanium on this knife and a little bit of CPM 154. So, I think what I'm going to do is just kind of go through Ergo's carry, cutting, action, all that fun stuff, and then maybe kind of wrap it up with some comments. But let's start with Ergo's. Ergonomically, for my hands, this knife is great. I wear men's medium gloves, but I fill them out real well. And I just barely get all four fingers on this knife. You can kind of choke up onto this flat up here a little bit. It's not super comfortable for me. I find myself just always naturally going with my pointer finger in this groove here, and then the rest of my fingers follow onto this flat. In this grip, it's really comfortable. We've got some jimping up here that honestly doesn't really bother me all that much. I would probably prefer the knife a hair without it. That said, in action, we'll talk about part of why I think they put that jimping there is something Ray Laconico showed me after I bought the knife, is that it can be front flipped. But anyway, a little bit of jimping there for my thumb. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. It's not ruining the knife for me. It's fine. So yeah, I just barely get all 4 fingers on it. It's definitely a smaller feeling knife in hand, but it's comfortable. It's super neutral. As you can see, this handle is just basically a rectangle with a groove in it. So in that way, there isn't really an uncomfortable grip on this knife. And yeah, hammer grip, also super comfortable. I like that a lot. Saber grip is great. Reverse, or kind of draw cut, if you will. Not reverse grip. Draw cut is also very comfortable because it's a rectangle of a handle. Reverse grip, stupid comfortable, really, really good in that grip. And a reverse grip draw cut, also really comfortable. So ergos, it's a win. There's the one spot of jimping that doesn't really bother me, and everything else is chamfered and pretty smooth, and it feels good, and the clip isn't hot spotty. It feels nice. I'm not finding anything on here that I'm hating. Even one of the like more typical spots to not love on a frame lock right here, where it can sometimes be sharp, they've knocked that down really well, so there's no sharp spot there. It's just a really well designed handle. All right, let's talk about action, because I already kind of pointed to it. It can front flip. It's not amazing at it, but when you get it, it's like, yeah, it's a pretty good poppy little front flip. The detent works for it. And yeah, it's absolutely doable, which is, I think, is kind of a fun little Easter egg, because it doesn't super look like it's supposed to be a front flipper, you know, but it works as one, so why not? The other method of deployment is the thumb studs. So you can thumb flick it, which as thumb studs go, man, this one's good on deployment. The detent is nice and poppy. It works really, really well for it. And you can middle finger flick it, which I do a lot. So I love it when thumb stud knives also middle finger flick. That's part of why I generally like holes over studs, is because my favorite way to open a knife is to middle finger flick. So it doesn't have the same authority when you middle finger flick it. Of course, my printer's going off. Sorry about that. It doesn't have the same authority when you're middle finger flicking it as it does when you thumb flick it, but it's doable. It works. It's fine. So I like that about it. Yeah, on closure, certainly not super drop shutty. I don't think it's really trying to be. It's on washers, but it'll come down, it'll shake. So it's not like you have to kind of roll it shut, but that is generally how I find myself closing it. Like, I'll pop it open and then I'll just kind of roll it shut with my pointer finger that way. And because it's on thumb studs, that also gives me kind of a spot to hook onto in that way. So it is satisfying in its own way to close like that, but I prefer drop shutty. I'll be the first to tell you, I'd rather have a knife that just guillotines shut. So it's pretty fun on deployment as thumb stud knives go. I like it. It's not like the greatest thumb stud knife I've ever experienced, but it's pretty freaking good. The detent is set really well. It's certainly not shaken out of here at any point. Like, it feels pretty solid. Definitely feels very tool-like, which is one of the things that it has as a similarity, to be fair, again, with Chris Reeve knives. I like these thumb studs better for sure, but it has a kind of tool-like action where it could definitely be slow rolled if you're that kind of guy. It feels smooth and kind of hydraulic, glassy, but it's not drop shutty and it's not fidgety like many other knives on bearings are trying to be. So fair is fair. It's similar to a Sebenza in that way. Maybe it's just that I like these thumb studs better, but to me, this is, I just failed like an idiot. This is more fun to play with than a Sebenza, but not by a mile. It's in a similar league. All right, next let's talk carry. So the profile of this knife is really slim. Obviously in this direction, there's not a lot of size. It's pretty thin this way, not stupid thin. It's not like trying to be ultra thin, but it's naturally a pretty thin profile. And there's just nothing sticking out anywhere to be bothersome. So this knife has been really, really comfortable in pocket. I've carried it most times, honestly, as a secondary knife. So back left pocket is typically where I carry my second. Pardon me, I'm burping as I go. It's typically where I carry my secondary. The one thing that I would say I think would make this way, way, way better for me and my preferences would be a deep carry clip. I don't love this clip. Functionally, it's fine. It goes in and out of pocket just fine. It's got good retention. It totally works, but it's not my favorite style of carry, especially a knife this little. if it were to have a deep carry, well-positioned pocket clip on it, I think that would definitely take it up a notch. And maybe that's something that they'll offer in the future. This mounting style will certainly work, probably, for some existing aftermarket deep carry clips. And I imagine if they were to try to engineer a clip, the way that this mounts these two screws just like that would totally work to create a deep carry clip for it. So that's good. That leaves us with cutting performance. So on these, at least for now, while they're hand ground, I hope this continues. It's a hollow grind, and it's a really, really well done hollow grind. Takes it down to a nice, thin, behind the edge profile. I have found that this thing is a great little workhorse, frankly. I love using this for processing cardboard for the dumpster. I've cut 1 or 2 apples with it. It did great. Opened a lot of packaging with it, tape and little plastic bits and zip ties and stuff like that. I've opened some of my daughter's toys. The tip is nice and precise for that. It's just worked really well. Like for secondary knife duty, and even stretching into like if this is the only knife that's on me, which has happened a couple of times. I've carried just this for a day. I haven't found it lacking in cutting performance at all whatsoever. I like it quite a bit. The CPM 154 for me has done okay. I haven't gone through the original edge yet. I've just barely touched it up on a strop at one point. I did that, frankly, at the same time that I was treating it for the little spots of surface rust that it was getting. Very, very minor. A little bit of rusting started to happen just from being in my sweaty pocket. And so I used a magic eraser for a moment, and then I treated the blade with some EDCI, and it's been perfect ever since. But in that same process of kind of maintaining the knife, I did just barely touch it up on a strop, and it's been going well. So they've heat treated this CPM 154 quite well. CPM 154 is very good steel. Don't get me wrong, I like CPM 154, but in my opinion, in 2021, almost 2022 now, it's a little bit of an antiquated steel, and especially at a price point of $380 that I paid for this at table. They may even be a little more than that once they kind of really hit market. I don't know what ultimately pricing is going to be on these, but I paid $380 at their table. And this is one of the first ones that they made. And CPM 154 just doesn't really excite me at that price point on a build like this, especially where it's just stone washed and kind of looks normal. On the same hand, I've got plenty of very expensive knives. I don't know what my wife is printing, but it's a lot of things apparently. On the same hand, I have quite a few like $800 to $1,200 knives right now that use CPM 154. So it doesn't like stop me from buying a knife that I really like. It's just that I'd be way, way, way more excited if it had something more interesting on it. Even if it's just 20CV or M390, or if it's Magna Cut, or if it's 10V, or something cool and spicy and fun, or at least just something that's like a benchmark of current performance, I think would be a better go-to on a knife like this. And they are changing it. So I don't know what that'll do to pricing or whether that'll change it at all, but I know that they're going to be using a different steel probably real soon. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, cutting performance is good. I've liked cutting with this knife. I think the fact that the ergos are so simple and easy make this knife also a breeze to cut with. It's also locking into my hand well. It's indexing well. So using a nice hollow ground, very traditional, just simple, I don't know, you call this a drop point blade. It's almost a spear point, I guess, if you really kind of, a drop point is what I'd go with. It's just a very predictable knife to use in a good way, in the sense that it feels familiar and it's easy to just go to work with. So you pair that with a good grind and a good edge that they put on it, and it's great. It works really, really well. So where does that leave us? I love this knife. I think it's great. Am I going to be keeping this knife? In the moment, no, which is kind of crazy because I've enjoyed it so much. I've loved carrying it. If I kept it in my collection, I'm sure it would still keep making it in pocket. But I've got a buddy who really wants this knife. I've already agreed to sell it to him when I'm done with the review. And the reasoning for that basically is just that I'm chasing other things right now. I have a line on a knife that I would really, really like to get for a price that is reasonable. And so I got to look at my collection and pick a couple of things to move out of it so that I can bring that new one in. And this is just going to be one of them. I may very well get another one of these when they're in a blade steel that I prefer to CPM 154. I think that might move the needle for me enough to get one and make it kind of a permanent collection piece, especially if I find out that there's a deep carry clip that works for it aftermarket, or if they'll make a deep carry clip for it. I think that would be rad too. So I think with a better steel, maybe a clip swap, then this is like permanent collection territory for me. But in CPM 154, the current build that it's in, I love it, but I'm just not like feeling a need to keep it forever, if that makes sense. That's kind of the way my collection goes. There's a lot of knives that I adore that I sell to keep fueling the fire. So that's the way that it goes around here. But honestly, I tip my hat to Monterey Bay Knives for, obviously they know what they're doing, right? They've been in the game for a while, so it's not surprising that their first in-house knife is good, but it's really nice to see that their first in-house knife is good, because plenty of people on their first go around at making something, they've got a lot of kinks to work out, and this doesn't feel like a lot of kinks to work out. Honestly, the things about it that I just said are kind of keeping me from really loving it are things that I know other people love. Some people would absolutely prefer this pocket clip to a deep carry one. 100% they would rather have this one. Some people, CPM 154 is their favorite steel. They love how easy it is to maintain and to put an edge on and all that kind of stuff. Good for them. That means this knife might be like perfect for them, and I can see that being the case. The way this knife is dialed on washers with this detent, it's great. It's a really, really good action. There's a lot of ways that this knife is winning. It's doing really, really well. It's just not 100% what I prefer, which very rarely is the case that I find a knife that is 100% what I prefer. So call that what it is. I genuinely tip my hat to Sanford Owen and Ray Laconico and their team over there for putting this together and having it come out so well. And this is one of the first few that they made. They didn't bring that many to Blade Show West, and that was the first time that they sold these. So this is part of a kind of elite bunch, I guess, of some of the first ones that came out of their hands. And it's really, really nice. So I guess that's it. I like this knife a lot. I'm going to let it go, but there's a good chance I'll end up with another one. There you go. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one.